This sector can grow 7x in 10 years, $3 billion to $21 billion. Now imagine you had the chance to invest in India's rise as the next global powerhouse. Like the IT sector back in the 2000s. Back then, India transformed into the world's go-to destination for technology outsourcing. And now, the next big outsourcing wave is right on the horizon. The pharma outsourcing industry, particularly Contract Research, Development and Manufacturing Organization sector, CRDMO. Remember that. Now, the CRDMOs are gearing up to become just as game-changing. Now, in the next decade, India's CRDMO sector is expected to grow 7 times. It's expected to expand from $3 to $3.5 billion today to $20 to $25 billion by 2035. That's a massive shift. In fact, India's CRDMO sector has already consistently outpaced global growth with an impressive 15% CAGR from 2019 to 2024, more than double the global average of 7 to 8%. Now, with global pharma companies looking to reduce reliance on China and also seeking cost-effectiveness, high-quality alternatives, India's decades of expertise in chemistry, a deep talent pool, and cost advantages are putting it in prime position to dominate. Now, this isn't another trend. This is a shift in global pharma outsourcing. And if you're watching closely, the opportunities for early investors could be nothing short of mind-blowing. Welcome to Bottom Line by Grow. In today's episode, we'll break down India's CRDMO story, what the sector actually is, who the key players driving it, the tailwinds, growth drivers, and the key risks that you should be aware of. Before we get there, let's break down what exactly a CRDMO is. Now, a contract research, development and manufacturing organization is a company that providing end-to-end services all the way from the discovery phase to the large-scale production of these drugs. Now, CRDMOs themselves, they are made up of CRAMS, which is Contract Research and Manufacturing Services, and CDMOs, which is Contract Development and Manufacturing Organizations. Now, CRAMS covers early stage services. We are looking at drug discovery and preclinical research, where contract research organizations or CROs, they work to identify potential drug candidates. For example, Syngene International is structurally research-led. In FY25, research services contributed 61% of the total revenue, while manufacturing streams contributed 25% from large molecule and 12% from small molecule biomanufacturing. The next stage is CDMO, which is focused on the development and large-scale manufacturing of the drugs. Now, CDMOs take the lead in process development, formulation of drug trials, and the pilot scale manufacturing of active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs. For example, Laboratories, they're a manufacturing-first CDMO. In Q2 FY26, generic drug substances contributed 37% of revenue, while custom manufacturing solutions, CMS, added 60%, making 97% of the top line tied to process development, scaling up, and commercial supply rather than research services. Moreover, within CMS, the mix was overwhelmingly 93% commercial. And finally, we reach commercial manufacturing, which is the large-scale production of the active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, and the finished drug products. Now, this phase is really volume-driven. You've got long-term contracts, and they provide a stable revenue stream for CDMOs. Historically, this has been India's stronghold, particularly in high-volume production of small molecule APIs and generic drugs. For examples, Divi's Laboratories. Custom synthesis contributed around 55% of revenue and generics about 45%, with exports accounting for roughly 90% of sales in Q2 FY26. Another example is Gland Pharma, a pure-play sterile injectables whose business is firmly anchored in large-scale production. In FY25, about 95.8% of its revenue that came from exports, and that was supported by 11 manufacturing plants supplying to roughly about 60 countries. As a consequence of all this, India's capacity for large-scale manufacturing has earned it, the reputation of being the pharmacy of the world. But what exactly gives India this competitive edge in the global pharmaceutical market? First up, it's the cost arbitrage. Now, skilled labor costs, and we're talking particularly about scientists and engineers, typically much lower than in the Western countries. And manufacturing expenses, these are 20% cheaper than in China. This allows companies to offer really competitive pricing while you're maintaining high quality standards. Second, our regulatory track record. Now, with approximately 650 USFDA-approved plants, now this is representing about 1/4 of all FDA-approved sites outside the United States, Indian CDMOs they've earned global trust in complying with really stringent international standards. Third up, policy and capital. Now, India benefits from strong government support. This is including PLI schemes, which incentivize the local production of key starting materials and the active pharmaceutical ingredients. Now, from 2000 to 2024, Indian pharma has attracted about $23.5 billion in FDI. Now, showing just how confident global investors are with the Indian industry. That's really not all. India's CRDMO sector is set for strong growth, and this is supported by a few powerful tailwinds. Firstly, the global pharmaceutical and biotech companies, they are increasingly outsourcing drug development and manufacturing. Now, this is due to the rising R&D costs and the declining productivity. Now, this trend, which is referred to as the outsourcing boom, now this is creating a substantial demand for our CRDMO services. Secondly, geopolitical shifts. We need to talk about this. Now, as companies around the world start to seek to diversify their supply chains in response to all the geopolitical risks, your trade wars and disruptions, such as, pandemics, India stands out as an attractive alternative to traditional manufacturing hubs, which was like China. You've got the China Plus One strategy, where global businesses are looking for alternatives to reduce over-reliance of China. And this is a major trend that is currently favoring India. In fact, India is poised to capture a large demand that traditionally went to China, positioning it to potentially absorb up to $15 billion of outsourcing business in the coming years. Now, this geopolitical shift will not only benefit India's existing small molecule manufacturing dominance, but it also positions us to compete in more complex, high-margin biologics and specialized drug modalities, bringing us to the next tailwind, new modalities. Now, India already is a pharma powerhouse in volume terms. Over 10,000 manufacturing facilities, 3,000 pharma companies, and as I said a while back, around 650 USFDA compliant plants. In fact, it's the world's largest supplier of generic medicines, and that's accounting for roughly 1 in 5 generics dispensed globally. And it now ranks around third in world by export volumes. Because this engine has been largely built on commodity generics, India is only about 11th by value, with pharma exports of about $27 billion, which is 3% of the global pharma exports. Now, this gap between very high volume and relatively modest value is the headroom. Now, new modalities, including antibody-drug conjugates or ADCs, gene therapy, stem cell therapies, RNA-based therapeutics. Now, these are expected to drive a large portion of future growth in the pharmaceutical industry. Between 2022 and 2028, these sectors, now they are projected to grow at a CAGR ranging from 26% for ADCs to 57% for stem cells. Fourth, the government support. Now, the Indian government has recognized pharmaceuticals as a strategic industry and taken steps such as the 5,000 crore rupee promotion of research and innovation in pharma medtech (PRIP) scheme. This funding supports startups and established companies, including Syngene, Newland, and Laurus Labs. This enables them to enhance research and develop more capabilities. Additionally, the 20,000 crore rupees allocated to the Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council, that's the BIRAC, this will further boost private sector-driven research, helping companies like Divi's Labs and Gland Pharma to scale up on innovations in biologics and the new modalities. Now, for example, you've got the Center for Advanced Protein Studies, CAPS. Now, this is an advanced lab to support complex biologics development on Syngene's Bengaluru campus, and this is explicitly a BIRAC-funded national facility under the National Biopharma Mission. Now, these funding initiatives, these are complemented by efforts to improve manufacturing quality, such as revisions to Schedule M of the Drugs and Cosmetic Act, which aligns India's good manufacturing practices with global standards. Now, these will ensure smoother regulatory approvals, particularly for exports to highly regulated markets like the United States and Europe. Moreover, there's also a proposed research link incentive (RLI) scheme to boost drug discovery and clinical research right here in India. It's under consideration, but if approved, it could further support the local CROs and strengthen the broader CRDMO ecosystem. So, with all these tailwinds and opportunities, what are India's CRDMO companies actually doing to capture them? Let's start with Divi's Labs. Here, the story is all about committed capex linked to long tenor CRAMS contracts. Now, management has bumped up the FY26 capex guidance to around 2,000 crore rupees to execute 3 large long-term programs. And they've even hinted that this could go beyond the 2,000 crore limit if more opportunities crystallize. Now, the phase 1 of the new Unit 3 at Kakinada, now that one is already up and running, and this is creating fresh capacity for new custom synthesis blocks and backward integration streams. In a nutshell, Divi is plowing sizable contracted capex into peptides, complex small molecules, and related chemistries, clearly skewed towards high-value CRAMs rather than generic commodity APIs. Next, let's look at Gland Pharma. In H1 FY26, Gland spent about 1,969 million rupees on capex, and the management has guided to a capex of roughly 2,500 million rupees in FY26 and about 3,000 million rupees in FY27. For Gland Pharma, most of the new capex, now that is aimed at scaling up sterile injectables and drug device formats. Now they're tripling the GLP-1 cartridge filling capacity from about 40 million to nearly 140 million units. And simultaneously, they're also building their ready-to-use IV bag franchise, where they've already had 20 filings and 14 approvals. On the top line side of things, H1 FY26 revenue of nearly 29,925 million rupees, that reflects a manufacturing-led base with strong pipeline leverage into pens, auto-injectors, and complex injectable segments, where outsourcing intensity and entry barriers, those are only going up. Now, backing all this is a multi-plant footprint across India and overseas that's already validated for regulatory markets. And the new capex is focused on both capacity and mix tilting more towards higher value complex programs rather than just raw volume. Now, coming into Syngene International. Here, the focus is very clearly on building out biologics and ADC capabilities across multiple sites and a move towards large molecules. Now, in FY25, Syngene spent around $85 million in capex, including the acquisition of a US biologic plants in the United States, and the management has also indicated that FY26 capex should be in the $55 million range as these new assets ramp up. On the ground, the Stelis Unit 3 biologic site in Bengaluru adds about 20,000 liters of capacity, which commercial fill finish, and together with the US site, total single-use bioreactor capacity now stands at roughly 50,000 liters. They've also invested in ADC bioconjugation capability, which is currently being operationalized. Why does all this matter? Now, the biologics platform is progressing from primarily clinical work to its first phase 3 and commercial programs, while the small molecule CDMO business has been reorganized into a follow the molecule model to improve utilization and win larger scale-up mandates as well. However, no growth story is without risk. First up, labor shortages. India's CDMO sector faces a significant challenge in scaling up its talent pool to capture the booming global market. Currently, India's workforce stands at around 50,000 full-time equivalents in the CRDMO space, but to meet the sector's projected growth, this number must expand 6 to 7 times by 2035. Now, India has a large undergraduate pool, but quality and specialization, they're still the major bottlenecks. In biologics and new modalities, there is a sharp gap, especially for experienced biologics process development scientists and regulatory affairs experts with US-India filing experience. Demand for these high-skilled roles is intense. Attrition is already 15 to 20%, and firms are competing for limited talent, driving wages up and risking project delays when positions stay vacant. And on top of that, the productivity in India is still about 30 to 40% lower than in countries like China, particularly in complex areas like biologics, which makes the need for deeper skills, it makes it even more acute. Secondly, limited government policies. While there are some upcoming initiatives like the capital investment benefits and talent training support, these are still in the real early stages. For instance, the government is offering concessional land rates for setting up CRO facilities in SEZ, special economic zones, such as the Genome Valley in Hyderabad. But this again is limited to certain regions of the country. And moreover, while you have initiatives like BIRAC funding and bulk drug parks providing long-term support, the lack of a comprehensive nationwide policy means that other countries are moving ahead faster in the CDMO space. Now, India's regulatory delays, particularly in the clinical trial approvals, also remain a concern. Now, regulatory timelines in India are 3 to 10 months longer compared to the United States and other markets. Now, this, when you combine it with a lack of streamlined processes for expanding manufacturing capacity, well, this results in longer time to market for Indian firms. These barriers, they hinder our ability to scale quickly and compete with other global CRDMO players. Third, access to capital. Now, over the period from FY21 to 24, India's average annual gross block addiction was only about 0.4 to 0.5 billion US dollars, while 2 to 2.4 billion dollars is needed annually to achieve the growth required for long-term success. Now, moreover, India's cost of capital, it's noticeably higher at 13 to 14% compared to the 8 to 10% range in the United States. This higher cost reduces India's competitiveness and it impacts its attractiveness to foreign investors, making it more difficult to secure the necessary funding for infra, innovation, and effectively expansion. Without addressing these financial hurdles, India risks falling behind as global demand for biologics and new drug modalities grows at 20 to 25% CAGR. Sum all that up, India's CRDMO story is really about moving from high-volume generics to high-value outsourced innovation, with companies like Divi's, Gland, Syngene, and others investing heavily to ride out this multi-year opportunity. The structural tailwinds, they're strong, but so are the challenges, which means that this is more of a long-term stock picker's theme than a quick sectoral trade. The real question is, how do you see this playing out? Can India's CRDMO names become the next IT-style compounding story, or do the risks still hold you back? Share your thoughts in the comment below, and thank you for watching this edition of Bottom Line by Grow.